Yo, everybody, welcome back to the Satsang podcast. We took a week off, given the circumstances and the climate in our country, if you will. We felt the need to hit the pause button, like most artists were doing, so everyone could keep their concentration and focus on the state of affairs in the country rather than a new podcast or an album dropping and whatnot. So we wanted to stand in solidarity with everybody in that and hit the pause button. We also called an audible on what was going to be the next podcast. Was my brother Brian Barberina, and he will be the episode with him will get released soon. But we called an audible because a friend of mine that I deeply, deeply respect, that I have a lot in common with, and who I really just wanted to hear speak on the subject, especially after talking to him on the phone for a little bit last week. I cut the conversation short because I knew I wanted to have him on the podcast, and that's Big Samir from The Reminders. The overwhelming thing with Samir is his innate ability to relate to anybody and everybody. And he tells this story of when he went and checked out the protest, who he ended up actually kicking it with and having conversations with, and it to me speaks volumes about who he is, and who his family is. And I cannot wait to have his wife Asia Black on the podcast. But if you don't know who The Reminders are, you should be listening to them. So go check that out. And man, I could say a million things, but I'm just going to shut up and let you listen to the podcast. Again, this is Big Samir from The Reminders. Let's go. All right, Samir, welcome to the Satsang podcast, bro. How you doing?
Thanks. Thank you, bro. Thanks for having me. I'm feeling great, man. I can't complain.
Good. Yeah, me too, dude. We closed out an online retreat this evening, and I had just enough time to hit the gym, and I just finally front to back listened to that new Run the Jewels.
Yeah.
Whew.
It's funny. Did you see that I was listening to it yesterday? Yeah, I listened to it. I listened to it front to back yesterday. I've actually been working out in the mornings because I have a little dog, and so now he's conditioned to jog with me every morning.
I love it.
Even if I don't feel like it, he's up for it. So it's like no excuse.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I listened to the first 4 tracks the day it dropped. But I just didn't have the time to listen to it all the way through. Man, those two were something.
Man, it's a tag team.
Yeah, and they're just both I feel like each of their verse on any given track, it's just like they just keep outdoing each other, and then it goes on to the next song and they keep doing it, man.
Yep.
I love that relationship between those two. Well, man, first off, why don't you just tell everyone a little bit about yourself? So everyone has an idea who we're chatting with.
Yeah, for sure. I'm Big Samir, one half of the musical group The Reminders. It's me and my wife, Asia Black. I'm originally from Belgium. I was born in Belgium, raised in the Congo. I moved to the States in 1995. And French is my first language. I learned English as a teenager. I had to adjust. I moved around a lot as a kid, so I had to adjust to new environments every single time. I dealt with a fair amount of, I guess I would call it racism from everywhere. From the time I was a young kid, being in Africa, I was the only light-skinned kid in my class because everyone was dark-skinned. So I always felt like I never fit in there. Then living in Belgium, I always felt like the African kid who didn't fit in there. And then I came to the States, and you already know the vibe here. I definitely don't fit in. Especially first place I moved to was San Antonio, Texas. So yeah. So that was a trip. And then my mother remarried. My stepfather was in the Air Force. That's how I landed in Colorado Springs, Colorado.
Yeah, that's like the epicenter for military bases in
Man,
Colorado.
we got 4 military bases here in Colorado Springs. We got Air Force, Army, we got the Air Force Academy, and then we got, what used to be Cheyenne Mountain, NORAD. I can actually see it from my window.
Wow.
Yeah.
Man, one thing I've been thinking on a lot, or not just thinking on, deeply, deeply meditating on, and then a lot of people are asking me, and because I'm an artist, which I think when we're artists, we're automatically, assumed leaders of different communities, the communities that we're in. So people ask me a lot, about like what they can do to help in the current situation. And the big thing that I keep coming back to, right, is like education leads to empathy. So like from your perspective, it's like, I'm curious about how do we make people understand, because not everyone is from Belgium, raised in the Congo.
Right.
You have so much different experience, not only as a Black man, but as a Muslim, as an immigrant.
Yep.
Like how do people, how do we make people try to understand? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think first things first is going to be that awareness. You know what I mean? You got to be willing to seek that knowledge, because a lot of people want shortcuts too. You know, you got to take the time and actually go out of your way and say, you know what, let me learn about a new way of life, a new spiritual belief, a new way of a new religion. You know what I mean? Like, let me go ahead and research some books, read some books. Let me go and engage with the people that we're talking about. You know what I mean? Let me even watch movies, watch documentaries. You know what I mean? Like, don't just, because people nowadays, man, people take shortcuts, go to YouTube, take a 5 to 10 minute quick clip, and anybody can upload stuff to YouTube. You know what I mean? You got to actually go to the source, and even beyond just looking it up, I think engaging with the people is going to be a big thing. That makes a big difference. And I always tell people, I hear stories sometimes of, oh, don't go to this place because it's like this, it's like that, or don't hang out with these people because it's like this, it's like that. When really everybody gets a different experience, you know what I mean? And I know we can probably get straight into it. The other day we were engaging, going back and forth about a certain groups that go into protest and their positions.
Yeah, I want to talk about that.
Yeah. I mean, maybe we could take our time and lead to that. We can go straight into that.
Let's go straight into it because here's the thing, man. I think a lot of people, especially with protests and everything that's going on right now, is there's kind of this false facade of what allyship looks like. And on this retreat, someone just said, one of the questions today for me was, how can we help Black people? I said, ask Black people how you can help them.
That's it.
And I know,
it's tricky.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
It's tricky because I feel like at this time, there's definitely everybody always needs help, right? But at this time more than ever, I feel like there's a huge awareness of everything that's going on, and for a lot of people, they're brand new to this whole concept. A lot of people are brand new to the concept of police brutality. A lot of people are brand new to the concept of a protest. Like, we have people our age and younger, our age and older, who have never been to a protest. You know what I mean? I've been to protests since 9/11, since, you know what I mean, that era, since Amadou Diallo was murdered by the police. And this is long ago. You know what I mean? And these are things that have been going on since the Black Panther Party, since even before that. This has been going on for decades, from Martin Luther King, you know what I mean? Like, and the list goes on. But for so many people, they just were not paying attention. You know what I mean? And what's amazing to me in the past couple of weeks, because right now I feel like we're in a place where we're dealing with so much. We're still not over coronavirus right now.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people forget that because they're so used to living in this time where, okay, I'm done with this, next week on to something else. Next week on to something else. It's almost like a lot of people right now are forgetting that there's still a pandemic going on. So slow down. Yeah. You know what I mean? I understand you want to jump the gun and you want to do a lot of things, but let's also focus on all of the different emotions that we're processing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know. One thing that's really that's been tough for me is like not being like, well, where the fuck y'all been? Like, dude, exactly. I remember when I started Satsang, the first group of songs I wrote, there's a song called No Justice, No Peace, where I like actually named the people that were killed by the police that year. And I remember, like, I love seeing everyone making signs, and I'm glad everyone's on the team now. Right. But it was like, I remember you guys telling me to calm the fuck down 7 years ago.
Right.
And now here we are.
Even I know you tour with Michael Franti and
Yes.
Spearhead tour, and store. I made it a point. I used to take my mom to every time he came to Colorado. I would take him I would take her to his shows, and at the end he would make it a point like to come and hug us and all of that. And that's what he's been about. That's what he's been talking about. You know what I mean? And so it's interesting because in the past couple of weeks, when Ahmaud Arbery got murdered, which that was just horrible.
Mm-hmm.
I went back to a song that Asia and I and our friends Rebel Diaz wrote after the Ferguson Rebellion.
Mm-hmm.
And after listening to the song again, it pretty much described the whole situation that was going on with Ahmaud Arbery. Just getting murdered with no remorse, no nothing. You know what I mean? And so rewind 3-4 years ago when we released the song, nobody cared. Nobody paid attention. Nobody cared. I play the song again now, and everybody's like, "Oh my God!" You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And same thing. Even this week I replayed this freestyle that I did over Lauryn Hill and
I shared that. God damn.
And bro, I released that last summer, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I actually wrote it like 2 summers ago.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, nobody cared, right? But now it's finally sinking in. It's finally making sense. It's like, oh my God, yeah, you're talking about this. Like, no, we've been as artists, as activists, as people who are aware and conscious of it, we've been talking about this. You know what I mean? And I think that's the tough part in when people come around and they're like, yo, I'm finally here. Like, what are we gonna do?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, what are we gonna do? Like, we don't have the answers. You know what I mean? We don't have the answers. And it's interesting because a lot of my friends who have been really active in protests for years after year, I was just on the phone with my brothers from Rebel Diaz yesterday. And I feel like we're all in a place where we're just really watching what's going on because I feel like the energy is different this time around. There's so much focus on it that it's almost like sometimes you got to slow down and really assess what's going on to understand what the next move has to be.
Yeah, I think that's the move right now too, bro, is because it's different. Like I was sending you pictures the other day when we were in Bozeman.
Yeah.
And that was a whole different kind of a couple of my observations. One, it was like 6,000 people.
Wow.
Yeah, man, in Montana. And
that's huge, yeah.
The vibe was beautiful. It was families. It was lots of young people, obviously, but also lots of old people, man. Lots of old white folks.
Yeah.
And so it started at this park, and then it went down Main Street in Bozeman. And something that I noticed that was really interesting to me was there was organizers walking around handing out water, but also just being like, hey guys, if you see any counter protesters, don't antagonize them. Like, don't start shit. Like, which I was like, that's what's up. But two, the other thing that I noticed that me and my wife keep talking about that was so wild is when we first turned onto Main Street, we walked by a group of, I think, six folks that had Trump shirts and open carry, they had their big rifles and shit. And 6,000 people walked by them, and we were standing not far from them, and no one even gave them a look, really.
Yeah.
No one got in their face. No one was aggressive. But all of the Trump supporter folks that were like driving down the street were like flipping people off with the most, like, so much anger in their eyes, dude. It wasn't like, I don't agree with what you're doing right now. It was, I fucking hate you.
It's crazy, man. And what's interesting is, since he got in office, that's been the energy. The energy's been really turned up, and it's really bringing that out of people as well. You know what I mean? People are really charged up, open carry. Like, I see it all the time. And, especially in places like Colorado, there's open carry. So you see that all the time. Tell you the truth, I haven't been to the protests in Denver this time around because I see how they turn out. It got crazy a couple times. And the past week, it's been pretty peaceful. But we live in Colorado Springs. So a friend of mine last Saturday, he called me and said, hey, do you want to go to the protest tomorrow? Earlier on, you know, we have families now. We're fathers now. So it's different. Like, you know, I see my little buddies who are 22, they're in college, they have nothing to lose. I see them on the front line shouting stuff. And I said, you know what? That's beautiful. Keep that energy, but be safe.
Yep.
Be careful when you're out there. Like I understand, like you guys are charged up. You listen to all this protest music and you fire it up, but keep that energy. That's fine, but be very cautious. And I say that because there's no guidance and there's no organization there.
No.
You know what I mean? They're just out there. Everybody's just going every direction, taking pictures and videos for the gram and, you know, not really being vigilant about what's going on. And so, so my buddy said, hey, do you want to go to the protest on Sunday? And I said, all right, cool. You know, what's the move? You know, who all is going? How are we making this move? And he ended up going before I got there. So Asian and I stopped by and just to peep the scene and see what's going on. And when we got there, we kept a safe distance, man. I really didn't want to get it in a mix too much. And when things like that come around, I try not to, you know, sometimes as artists, we also have to face the fact that people start to make things about you. You know what I mean? Like, I remember we went to a rally 2 years ago and we had the kids with us and then we got into a disagreement with a certain group that was there and it was in the newspaper. It became, the reminders are, you know, facing this group because they were being disrespectful to elders. It became this whole thing.
Well,
and I really don't want to,
let's go into it, man. Who was the group that was being disrespectful?
And at the time, I had never heard of Antifa. I had never heard of them. I didn't know what they were about. But this particular group here, they were being very disrespectful to the elders who were just speaking. And it was just a peaceful protest. And they were just charged up and they just had too much energy and they just were trying to get riled up. And we were like, listen, you do what you do, but you can't say "fuck you, bitch" to an older person who is trying to speak. You know what I mean? Like, there's a certain level of respect that we have to get here. And so we went up to them and we said, hey, no, we don't do that. You know what I mean? Like, and our kids, you know, our kids never seen anything like that before. Never seen people with masks on and, you know, dressed all crazy and riled up. And I was like, listen, nothing's gonna happen. You know what I mean? We're safe, we're fine. And so we went and we spoke to them and they try to get buck and wild. It's like, no, we don't fear you. We don't have any fear. We're not afraid of you, but we're also not going to let you just talk to people like that. You know what I mean? And so then later on we found out, Antifa, I didn't even know it was a thing. I didn't know what it was. And so then we found out about, you know, the group and what they stand for. And like you mentioned, like you were introduced to them in a different way, you know, earlier on in your life. And so with all that in mind, we're like, okay, when we go to this protest, let's just keep our distance. Let's just kind of peep the scene. And as soon as we got there was this young kid, man, young military kid, looks like in his early 20s, white male, huge American flag, AR on his back, 9mm on his hip. And so, you know, we're friendly people. So as we walk by, we're like, hey, man, how you doing? He's like, hey, what's going on? I've been here for 2 days, la, la, la. And then he starts telling us that he's in the military, that he's just there to protect the protesters. He's like, if anything happens to them, that's why I'm here. Even if the police get a little too wild, I'll rather get in between them and trying to protect them and trying to, you know, mediate and figure everything out. I was like, cool. So then, you know, we were there for about 30, 40 minutes. And as we were there, he kept staying close to us and telling us a little more about himself, where he came from. And he's a super cool kid. But the fact that he had the AR and he had the American flag, people were like, fuck you, racist. And the whole time he's like, no, that's not it. Like, I'm not. And, you know, people were calling them cops. They were calling him all kinds of stuff. And he was there by himself. And I thought that was just hilarious, you know, the irony of it. You know what I mean? I was like, at the same time, bro, you have to see what it looks like to a lot of these people. You know, it looks like something that they're used to seeing on the opposite side, you know?
Yeah, that's the kind of you know, that's my big fear with gang mentality, man, is, you know, that sort of thing that you did is out of the question. Let's go up and just talk to this cat and see what he's actually about.
Yeah.
You know, so everyone's making these snap judgments. And, you know, I revert back to this story all of the time to kind of sum up mob mentality. There's a kid in, I believe it was on the Florida State campus years ago, standing atop a parking garage, threatening to jump, and a crowd of people forms below. Someone starts chanting jump. Before you know it, the whole crowd is chanting jump. The kid jumps. And then afterwards, the cops are like, why the fuck were y'all yelling jump? And they're like, I don't know. You know what I mean? Don't have an answer. They're like, because everyone was yelling jump. So it's like you're saying, man, it's the things that are really inspiring that I'm seeing in the protests is like, if you look back at the Rodney King riots, you know, when white folks were rolling through Watts, they were getting pulled out of their cars. You know, it was like full anger, crazy. Yeah. And what we're seeing now is the opposite of that, dude. It's really the first time since the 60s that we've seen black, white, Asian, natives all together. Everybody. It's like, it's us versus this bullshit.
And it's
everywhere, man. Germany, I just saw a picture from Germany today. So, and that's what's beautiful to me, man. That's what really gets me choked up. And we're talking about history and education. So I always, man, have just been in love with studying the civil rights movement and the unsung heroes of that movement. And it's so funny when I hear people recently going, it's just so crazy right now. This is unprecedented. We've never seen anything like this. I'm like, have y'all read? Yeah, actually,
people don't read, man. People don't read.
Yeah, no, it's like actually, from 1967 into the early 70s, we had exactly this, and then on top of that, we also had the Vietnam War, and Richard Nixon was fucking president. So it's like it was almost the exact same concoction. Yeah, you know. Now we just have social media. You know,
that's what I'm saying. The difference is that was not documented. You know what I mean? I mean, you know, it's documented to some degree, but it wasn't like, okay, here, the whole world gets to see this. You know, the whole world gets to see how unfair this is, how unjust this is. You know, now you don't have a choice but to face that reality, and everybody is seeing it. Regardless of how you feel about it, like, you're going to see it. You're going to see that reality.
Yeah, it's interesting. To go back to the anger that I saw in some of those counter protesters, I don't understand what's getting lost in translation. Like, and all I can come to, you know, my wife is a clinical therapist, you know, so the thing that I keep coming back to is like, man, it isn't even about this. You just got a bunch of interpersonal shit. And this like Trumpian aggression is this is your outlet. You know, this is how you've found to like leak out your hurt against the world. Let's talk a little bit about some history. One thing that two books that absolutely changed my life, and I know they touched you as well, was the Autobiography of Malcolm X. And Revolutionary Suicide. You're actually the only person I've met that's actually read that book.
Huey.
And again, you know, people think this is like unprecedented. And one thing that you're saying is the protests when we're talking about kind of lack of organization and everyone's out there kind of shooting from the hip. That's not really how the Panthers did things. They had a
not at all. And you know, that's interesting because you said I'm one of the only other person that read that book that you know. And to me, I thought it was really impressive when you posted that book in particular, because most of my partners, most of my comrades, like, we've all read both of those books. And, you know, as Black men, it's almost like something that we do. You know what I mean? It's just a part of rites of passage. And for me in particular, you know, I grew up in a household where my mom had pictures of Malcolm X, Marcus Garvey, Elijah Muhammad, like Martin Luther King, all these guys. Like, I was familiar enough with those guys. And by the time I was fresh out of high school, you know, I was an artist already since then. You know, I never went to college or anything. I've just been making music since. But at that time, I was on the quest for knowledge. So that's when I picked up a lot of these books. That's when I read the Autobiography of Malcolm X, and then watched the movie again just to get that visual, you know, which Spike Lee is incredible. And Denzel Washington became Malcolm X for those 3 hours. And Huey P was another one. And so, you know, I'm in the bookstore and I came across that book and I had to pick it up. And the level of organization that they had is unmatched. is unmatched. And that's why they were so feared, because they were so knowledgeable of their rights, of their history, of everything. They knew exactly how to move. And even, you know, the breakfast program, you know what I mean? Like every single thing they did, I fell in love with the whole concept. And you know, I push that to anybody I come into contact with. I'm like, study these figures, man. Study these people that came before, especially in again, like the question you asked earlier, or that people are asking you is, you know, how can we help? What can we do? All you have to do is study these people. Study Huey P. Newton. Study the Black Panther Party for self-defense. Study Malcolm X. All of them, not just the early days and deem him a racist and a criminal, or don't, you know, or the last days when he was Sunni Muslim. And no, you have to understand the full story, the all the aspects of the man. You know what I mean? And I named my son after him.
Yeah, man, that's beautiful. And dude, and that's the thing, like you're saying, is the whole story. I think what makes Malcolm so relatable is that you can listen to him and I just feel like his story is the ultimate hero's journey for truth, right? He starts off as a criminal.
Yep.
And then while doing time for crime, he finds God.
Yep.
Which is common.
Yeah.
And then comes out and gives himself full devotion, blind devotion.
Yeah.
Almost just like, these people can do no wrong and I'm on the squad and this is what we're doing. And then to me, the most beautiful part of the story was when he found truth. Unlike some of the people in his company, he did not ignore it or hide it. He said, well, I have to be on the side of truth and God, not being pious. So he went his own way, risked his own life. And most people don't know that, because the clips that they see of Malcolm X are, you know, at the height of his most militant time, you know, when he's speaking directly against white people. And and a lot of people don't see the clips of post-Mecca Malcolm when he was saying, like, no, man, we all got to work together because this is the common. And if you want to help, hop on.
And that's, to me, that's, or to a lot of people, that's when he was the most dangerous, when he came back with that message, because that message is such a bigger message than anything. You know what I mean? Like, once you start moving in that way, like, you mean to tell me this man is going to have that much power, the same power he had before, plus more now, because more people are actually going to follow and listen to him, which is incredible, because we're in a time where I see more and more Malcolm quotes in videos and on Instagram all day long, or, you know, all over social media. Like, I'm, you know, people are tagging me, like, even my mom, my family is like sending me these Minister Farrakhan speeches from, you know, 2-3 years ago, or, you know, 4 or 5 years ago. And I'm like, you know what? I've already seen these speeches. Like, I keep up with that stuff. This is the lifestyle that I'm living. I'm aware of all of that. Now that everybody's awake, let's pay attention. You know, these same people, like, if Malcolm was alive right now, would you listen to his message? Or what will it take for you to actually pay attention? You know, we have Minister Farrakhan right now, who's here and who has been telling us that all this stuff is going to take place. And now you're showing me videos from 3 years ago. Like, nah, that's not how it goes. And so, you know, it's interesting. My mom sent me something 2 days ago, and I sent her the flyer of the next time Minister Farrakhan is going to be speaking, which is July 4th. I said, well, tune in on the 4th and let's see what he got to say this time, but let's see it in real time. Let's not wait till years go by for it to actually make sense to us. You know what I mean?
Yeah, what a beautiful mind he is, man.
Man.
Yeah, I remember seeing him as a boy. I've just always been taken back by leaders. You know, I get asked all of the time in interviews and shit like that, you know, who's someone that you look up to? And my answer always without hesitation is Fred Hampton.
Yeah.
I'm from Chicago, 1.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
2, I think people if you don't know who you're listening, you don't know who Fred Hampton is, get on your Google machine and order the book Murder of Fred Hampton. You know, at 20 years old, the level of dedication and, like we're talking about, organization, but to fit with the trend of Malcolm, the reason he was murdered by the Chicago police was not only was he running the breakfast programs and doing all of the Panther work that Panthers were doing in every city, there's this amazing footage that's on YouTube where he kind of has a little Southside Chicago town hall, and he's got Polish, he's got Irish, there's like 4 or 5 different white guys there. And he just has them all at this table, and he's like, what we're looking at is not a black thing or a white thing or a Mexican thing. What we're looking at is classism and economic warfare.
Yep.
The idea here is if they can keep us all poor, they're going to keep us out of the way. They can continue to fulfill their agenda. But he successfully socialized the entire south side of Chicago. So it was like, okay, well, we don't need any of your shit anymore because we've created our own systems. And this is something I come back to a lot. I know we're both dads. I think about this often, and my manager was just like, all right, bro, take it easy. Someone was like, commented on one of my posts and was like, time for revolution. Like, do you know how to fish? You know how to hunt? You know how to fight?
Oh.
What are you talking about? What are you talking about right now?
And everybody, because it sounds good. People romanticize the idea of revolution. You know what I mean? It's like such a cool word. It's like, yo, let's ride. They put a fist up and like, no. Like once that curfew hits and you're done at the protest and you go home, like it's not over. It's definitely not over. That's when everything begins. And again, I go back to two months ago when we first heard, okay, it's a lockdown. You have to stay inside your home because we don't want this virus to spread or whatever the case may be. People were going crazy buying toilet paper. Like, look, what do you know how to do? You don't even know how to wipe your own butt without toilet paper. You know what I mean? Like that's the reality. Like we're talking about people who think they're ready for revolution, but they're stocking up on like just silly stuff. You know what I mean? It's crazy.
Yeah, I know. It's funny, but it's not. Yeah, I mean,
right.
That's the thing that no one wants to talk about. And I think, it's an interesting thing because, where I live, my kids will just never have the experiences that I've had, and it's hard because I take great pride in that because I've built a life for them where they don't have to.
That's beautiful, man.
But the other side of it is it's, something that I struggle with is I'm like, man, maybe I'm doing them wrong by making their life this easy. Maybe because I can explain until I'm blue in the face what it's like.
I think, man, because we've all. I mean, I feel like, and then again, this is father to father. The purpose for us to, we've been through these things. We've struggled enough to not want our children to struggle as much, right? We work so hard so that they don't have to. We work so hard so that they can have a more comfortable life. And a few years back, we moved to the north end of town, which is like, well, it's more central. And it's like, okay, it's a little safer on this side of town. They have better schools. And, come to find out, there was break-ins in the neighborhood. My car got stolen, all kinds of stuff started happening. And we started realizing that the schools that they were going to, it was cool, but it wasn't necessarily the best fit. I was like, you know what? The stuff that I was trying to get away from when I moved away from the South Side is here too. It's everywhere. So I moved my family back to the South Side of town where it's mainly black and brown so that they can experience that life. You know what I mean? You see what it's like as soon as you walk out of the door. But at the same time, I'm also going to keep you safe, and I'm also going to keep you in an environment that's better than the environment I grew up in. You know what I mean? But you still feel that energy. And so a lot of time, like you're a father who brings your family around as much as you can. You know what I mean? Like you spend a lot of time with your family. We're the same way. Like we used to take a lot of trips and take our kids with us and expose them to the world. So yeah, they might not have been raised in the projects of Queens, but they've seen enough of Queens. You know what I mean? Like we go and visit Asia's family in Queens. We go and when we go to Chicago and visit our friends, like we'll be there for a couple of days and they'll take part in the after school program and the different nonprofits that we would go and do workshops in. We let them engage with those kids. You know what I mean? Like, so when we do the work that we do, they can come and be a part of it and engage with the people that we come into contact with. And that's opened them up, and they got to see the world from a different perspective. Like, yeah, I'm born and raised in Colorado Springs, but I've seen enough of the world to understand it from other people's perspective, even, you know.
Yeah, man, that's beautiful.
And,
Yeah, I
and
think.
but definitely, you know, you're doing the right thing, man. You're supposed to raise your children in a better way that you even came up with, you know. And I think the key is to definitely keep their eyes open, and show them the world.
Yeah, man, it's been an interesting thing, particularly with, my son. He's 16, and he's kind of, he's my stepson, but I've been with him since he was 5 years old.
Yeah.
Um, and he's typical, like, yeah, man, that's fucked up, right on, but living his life. Whereas
Yeah.
my daughter, man, she's got her computer open every day, and she's just,
Right.
it's blowing her mind what she's seeing. She just like, it breaks her little heart, man. And
Yeah.
she doesn't understand why this shit's happening, so I'm trying my best to explain it. And one thing I see a lot of people talking about, right, is defund the police and
Yeah.
all of these criminal justice, these aspects of criminal justice that need changed. And while I agree with all of that, I think the biggest thing, to come full circle with what we're talking about, man, is we need to see an education overhaul. When I was in high school, the only subject I gave a fuck about was history. It was the
Yeah.
only thing that would engage me. And I'll
You
never
have to understand your history. Yeah.
And here's the crazy shit though, man. I remember my high school history book, my US history book, had one page on the Black Panthers. And it literally was like 2 paragraphs that was like,
Yeah.
here's a
Yeah.
picture of Huey and Bobby. They started this on this date here. Doesn't say any of the shit they did. It just says this was a militant black movement based out of the Bay.
Yeah.
No information whatsoever. And then a whole chapter on Dr. King. And same thing, Malcolm got a paragraph. Here's Malcolm.
Yeah.
He was a radical Muslim. And
And it limits it to that, to those those 2 or 3 figures, and that's it. It's like, man, it's so much more than that. And to tell you the truth, like, the education that comes from home is always going to be bigger than anything else. So our eldest daughter, who is now 14, when she was 10, I believe, it was Black History Month, and she went up she asked her teacher, like, "Oh, so what are we doing for Black History Month?" And the teacher was like, she didn't have a plan. You know what I mean? She really didn't have a plan. That was the reality of it. And then they were like, "Oh, well, we can have a meeting and talk about it." And so she went ahead and talked to the principal, like, "Well, I think we should have, more for Black History Month." And so, they went on to cover a different figure every day of Black History Month. And that was the first year. Then the second year, it reverted back to, Dr. King, and she was like, at the time, this was like right before Mandela passed, and she was like, she had just read a book on Nelson Mandela, and she was like, "Well, I think we should learn more about Nelson Mandela." And the principal was so surprised that she was like, "I think I'm gonna make every student learn about Mandela and do a project on it." And so, following week we go to the school, and all the halls had artwork from every student at the elementary school, which was really incredible. But that's the thing, is so much more than Malcolm Martin, you know what I mean? It's so much
yeah,
more than that. And to go even beyond that, it goes beyond before slavery.
yeah,
I always tell, Asia and I always have this conversation about, my personal experience is before history. I come from Congo, which was colonized by Belgium. My mother's half Belgian, half Congolese, and so my experience is not slavery; it's colonialism. So that's another aspect of Black history. You know what I mean? And then you have Mansa Musa. You have so much rich history that's a part of Black history that's just not covered in any text. You know what I mean? Any school, any education system. And that's why a lot of times you have children that end up being homeschooled, that go to these private schools that are,
100%, man.
these little private schools that are like Afrocentric, like, which are beautiful, beautiful. I just wish they had more funding, more budget and more resources. make those more available.
Yeah, man. I think, a huge blessing that kind of came out of the pandemic is when, it took about 2-3 weeks for my kids' schools to get their shit in order, to be like,
Yeah,
okay, cool, here's your online setup.
yeah,
Well, so after week 1, my wife was like, you're home with them all day, teach them.
right,
So I was
right,
like, all right, cool.
yeah,
Cool. So, we had, I just didn't learn shit in school that was really helpful to me.
right,
Uh, and I always was taken aback by the fact that, I didn't learn how to do my taxes. I didn't learn how to do a budget, but we played dodgeball.
right.
And so like I did one day with the kids where I had them do, I mean, bro, the list of questions they had to answer about the Black Panther Party was insane. Both of them was like 7-8 pages.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then we did another one where I essentially gave them a pretend business and was like, all right, here's your overhead, here's your employees, here's percentage of taxes, and then gave them like a fake job bid and was like, okay, is this job worth it or not?
Right.
And that's the sort of stuff, like, it's just crazy that isn't paramount in schools, that it's this.
And that's the thing, man. The past 2 years, Asia and I have been teaching financial literacy in schools, and we started out in Colorado, and then we've taken it everywhere with this organization called Fund in the Future, put on by Raymond James, and we get different funders to sponsor an event, and basically we will go into a school, bring our own sound system, we'll give them a quick 20-minute concert. And then from there, we go into the presentation and we tell our stories. Asia went to college for 4 years on a scholarship. And then when she lost the scholarship, she essentially came home with no degree, but still has a student loan that she's paying right now as a mother. And I have my dream of being a mega superstar, and not realizing how the ins and outs of when you go on tour and how much money it takes, the expenses that it takes when you go on tour. You think, especially when you get a good opportunity, you're open for somebody big, you're like, yeah, it's on. And you come home and you're like, oh, this is how much we spent and this is how much we made. You know what I mean? And you start to look at your credit cards, the one that are maxed out. And so we basically tell these students our stories, and then we talk to them about what the difference between a credit card and a debit card. Because a lot of these kids are about to go to college and have no idea that a credit card is actually not your money. They have no idea what all goes into the student loan that they have, and how much money they're going to owe back. And a lot of times they don't even know what they really want to be. They're just in school and just keep going to school. And before you know it, you own all this money and you back trying to get a 9-to-5, a quick 9-to-5, And we talk about predatory lending, which a lot of kids turn 18, still don't have a bank account, but you're going to borrow $500 from some cash, some payday loan spot. And they don't teach that in schools, to the point where after we give these presentations, a lot of teachers are like, man, I needed this, or a lot of teachers always tell us, like, would you come back and teach these kids' parents the same thing? You know what I mean? So many young parents still have no idea. They're still trying to figure it out. And I think financial literacy is something that, people really need to get together, especially now that a lot of artists are even talking about it. You're talking about it in songs, and, even comedians like Kevin Hart has like a Chase sponsorship, he does commercials.
Yep. I see that. He's a fucking cool cat, man.
Yeah, man. I got a lot more respect for him now. After I watched his documentary, I watched some of the interviews he gave recently, and I'm like, okay, I get it. Like, a lot more people are starting to wake up, man. It's not just the protests. A lot of people are just waking up in general and realizing, like, okay, entertainment is cool, but then what?
Yep.
Yeah,
and I think, one thing that I see a lot, man, because I'm at the MMA gym all the time, is it's like, granted, my window to make music is a lot bigger than someone's window to fight.
Yeah.
But I still have that mind frame all the time of like, okay, man, I only get X amount of days of sunshine, so I gotta harvest while it's good, And one thing financially, the joke that I always make to my wife is, I got an 800 credit score, man, and it's all from Satsang. and how I've run the business. I've never borrowed more than I could pay back. You know, I grew up selling drugs. So my idea, I just never wanted to owe anyone money because that's a problem.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so it's like, whether that be a person or a bank, I just don't want to owe anyone. So I've just always run the business that way, where even like you're talking about taking opportunities to go on tour, it was like, you know, I knew I was going to break even before I even got in the van, but it's like, okay, here's how I'm going to structure this and do this. And it's amazing how many artists, like you're saying, man, you know, they get in this on this ride, and, you know, there's 5 dudes in the band and a sound guy and an engineer, you know, they got 8 people on the road. And I'm like, what the fuck are you doing, man? There's no way you can afford this.
Yeah. They've seen other people do it, so they want to do it that same way. I'm like, bro, that's not how it works. You gotta, you know, put things in order, man. Don't bite off more than you can chew.
Yeah. And people don't, it's wild how many people I don't see do that. People all the time are like, you know, how come you don't have a sound guy yet? I'm like, well, because I like making the amount of money I make right now. I'll get a sound guy when I know I can, when I know it's not a thing, you know?
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Why? So something I want to talk about with you that hit a chord with me the other day. I think there's this conversation around privilege that has become overcomplicated. And while I got you, I want to get your take on it, but I want to say the thing that I always come back to when we talk about white privilege is I gotta try not to choke up, because I do every time I say it.
Yeah, man.
You talk about having to have the talk with your kids. And I've been severely physically abused growing up. I've been homeless. I've been, you know, you fucking name a struggle you could have as a human being on this planet, you know, and I've had some taste of it, but never ever in my entire life will I have to sit my son down or my daughter down and have the talk. So why don't you talk about the talk, and kind of your takes on privilege?
Yeah, and you know what's interesting is I remember before having any children, I remember listening to a Talib Kweli song where he talks about how his son loves the police and, you know, he plays with his cars and this and that. And he was like, but one day I'm going to have to break down to him, as you grow up and you gain a little size on you, you're going to become a threat to said police officer. And again, it depends on where you live. You know, I know a lot of people who say, oh, you know, I never met that kind of thing never happened to me, or whatever the case may be. I personally, you know, growing up, I didn't, you know, I grew up in a single mother home. You know, my mother had a boyfriend that was really abusive to her. And I remember my aunt calling the police. Police never showed up. But, you know, I seen the police on my block, and, you know, I'm 12 years old holding a stick, and it became a big deal. Like, you know what I mean? Like, yo, what are you doing with this and that? I remember being 12 years old with my friends going down to the grocery store, and us being handcuffed because somebody stole something. All of a sudden, you know, we're a group of young black men, young black boys at the time, you know, and before you know, we're handcuffed and this and that. So I knew that the day was going to come to have the talk with our children. I just never knew it was going to come this early. You know what I mean? My son is 9 years old, but this is a talk we've had a year ago already. You know what I mean? 8 years old. Why? Because they're aware. Again, like our daughter, who's 14, said, with everything that's going on, she just took Instagram off of her phone. She's like, I can't take it. It's too much for me. And to the point, you know, even her friend, again, talking about privilege, now everybody is like, you know, the memo is like, check on your black friends or reach out to them. Like, the kids are doing that too. You know what I mean? So her classmates are like, hey, you know, Black Lives Matter. You know, I hope you're doing good. You know, sending love to your family. But at the same time, I feel like for some of us, it's almost like a trigger. It's like, oh, you know what I mean? Like some people don't want to hear it at this point because it's too much. It's a lot of energy. It's a lot of emotion to process. But anyway, so back to the talk. It's like, it's such a delicate talk, because it's like, you know what, son, we're spreading love no matter what. You know what I mean? Even last night when I was telling my daughter that, I was telling you with the Instagram, I was telling her about this this podcast we were going to do. And so I played some of your songs for her, and she was like, wow. She started reading some of the comments on the YouTube clip, and she was like, the message that he has, I can see that why people, you know, because it was like people saying like, if you haven't heard this today, I love you. You know what I mean? She was like, this is such a powerful message, and I see why it's making people feel the way they feel. You know what I mean? And so that's the same type of message we spread in our home, and we spread in when we engage with people. It's, you know what? This may happen one day, but it doesn't change who you are. It doesn't change how you behave. You know what I mean? You are who you are, and just stand up for love. You know what I mean? And it gets tricky because they see the reality of what's out there. They see the reality of what happens. You know what I mean? And it's just that fine line, man. Some days I'm like, some days we try not to even talk about it.
Yeah.
You know, just because it's so overwhelming. And I think even now that's the place that we're in. It's like, man, there's so much happening, and there's so much. It gets tricky, man, being in this position, because it's like a lot of people are looking to us for answers, answers that we may not even have. Like a lot of people, it's like, man, it's like, boom, I'm on the phone because this person, oh, listen, I was thinking about this or this. Again, like the people that are new to the conversation, just like explaining it, boom. And then, bro, I swear to you, by the time I hang up the phone, it's another call with the same exact thing. Like, yo, what can we do? You know what I mean? Like, and I think even like right now that's where Asia is. It's just like drained. Like we're just exhausted and tired. You know what I mean? And we're carrying it well, but I think at the same time it's weighing on us on top of what the world is going through with the virus. And what I mean by that is we may not be affected, but we know relatives who passed away. You know what I mean? Like when we call, because every summer, man, we take our kids to New York so they can spend time with Asia's grandmother, who's in her 90s. And because that's important for our children to still have a great grandmother who's alive.
Yeah.
So like, you know what? Spend as much time as you can with her, like whether it be, you know, Christmas break, summer break, and document what she tells you, the story she tells you. Write them in your journal. You know, record her voice. You know what I mean? You can do it on your phone now. You know what I mean? It's not that hard to do. And so now, not being able to visit her like that and calling her, and she says, you know, she told us, you know, your aunt and uncle across the street, they passed away from coronavirus 2 weeks ago. And she's like, I'm so afraid to leave the house. And, you know, and she's emotional when we talk to her because she doesn't know if we're ever going to see her again. You know what I mean? So dealing with that already, and dealing with, you know, our parents, you know, who they deal with health issues, you know what I mean? And just navigating that, and navigating what they say you can and can't do. Wear a mask, don't wear a mask, go here, don't go there. Oh, now everything's open. Like, oh, you know, you're, as a musician, everything is canceled for the next year, or you don't know when things are going to, dealing with so much uncertainty. And then on top of that, you have to constantly talk about the brutality of these police officers and Black Lives Matter. And like, yo, first of all, like, this is not a new thing. It's something that has been going on. And it's something that we have been talking to our families about and talking to our children about. But I think at this point, it's just like pushing it overboard. You know what I mean? Pushing it over the ledge. And we've been trying to navigate the two. Like, okay, cool, we're still going to engage in as much as we can, but at some point I feel like we still have to take a break and reset and reevaluate where we are and where we stand. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to talk. We're going to lose our minds. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
we're not going to be able to actually be present. We're not going to be able to be present and actually speak on these topics. And that's why even yesterday I checked in with my buddy from Rebel Diaz, and they felt the same way. They were like, you know what? I can't even be out like that, but for so many reasons. You know, one, you know, having a family. Two, pandemic. There's so many different things that's like, okay, let me reevaluate. And then we see some of our young homies who are out there who are getting arrested, who are getting beaten up. It's a part of it. It's a part of protest. Like the minute you go into a protest, you know what you're signing up for. It may get violent. It may get this. It may get that. We've seen it. It happened to Dr. King.
And these cops giving no fucks right now.
Yeah, I mean, and again, like, they used to sick dogs on us. You know what I mean? The water hose, the whole thing. Like, we've seen it happen time and time again. Now it's rubber bullets. Now it's tear gas. And they don't care if a woman is pregnant. They don't care if it's a young person. They don't care if you got goggles on. Like, you get banged up in the head, the whole thing. And so it's a part of it. And, we just got to evaluate where do we fit in. And also, because a lot of time people are like, what do I do? Do I donate? Do I, say a prayer? Do I speak out? You do what feels right to you. But the number one thing you have to do is inform yourself. Read as much as you can. Don't just spend, a quick 20-minute and then you're like, yo, I got it all figured out. Let's go. No, nobody got it figured out. Even the people who are leading these protests, by the time they get home, they have to just take a breather and say, okay, now what did I learn from this particular day? What have I learned today from what happened out there? What did I learn today from the new developments of everything? You know what I mean? And it's tricky, man.
Yeah, it's going to be wild to see how this shakes out. Because again, I mean, all the protests and everything in the 60s led to, a civil rights bill being passed.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see what the next phase is. It was funny, like I said to you when we talked last week, man, I felt this call to just reach out to all my Black friends, especially being a musician. I just have so many people, so many Black men that are really close to me, Yeah. And my first thing was like, not questions, not none of that, was just like, hey man, love you.
Yeah.
Because my thought was just like, I'd be wondering.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Fuck.
But at the same time, you already know where you stand, and I already know where you stand, because we will have these conversations whether this was going on or not.
Mm-hmm.
We will have these conversations as musicians and as artists, and as when we met at Arise last summer, and I felt the energy right away. You told me a little bit about where you came from and what you've been through. It's a given. It's a no-brainer. It's like, okay, yeah, we stand on the same ground.
Yeah, dude. Something that Asia said during that panel, I loved so much when she got up there and just started going off, man. She's so fucking smart in the way that she talks. But she was talking about cultural representation. She said, there's a lot of weight on like, okay, well, you look like this or come from here, so you can't speak on that. Where it's like,
yeah,
rather than an emphasis on, do we have the same values?
Right.
Do we have the same foundation of knowledge? Then okay, go ahead and speak. Because because I don't necessarily feel, if I know someone has the knowledge and the background and I feel culturally represented, then I don't feel a need to speak up. I'm like, okay, cool. Yeah, you can take the floor, man.
Absolutely. And that, again, I take that same approach. That's why a lot of times I try, I play the background, or I kind of lay low when I come into certain environments, because I know so many of my friends that are way smarter than I am. I know so many of my friends that are well-versed in certain topics that I'm like, you know what? Like, some people, give the mic to Samir because he's in the Reminders and he's a musician and he's a dope MC. Cool. You've seen me do that. You know me for that. Now, let me use my platform to actually put somebody in front of you who may be able to articulate something better than I can. You know what I mean? And that's something that's very important. And you have to make that happen. You have to let that happen. Like, listen, if this person, there's somebody here who has same values as I do. And I know if I put a microphone in his face, he's going to be able to say something, on the Killer Mike level, where, I may not be from Atlanta, but we feel the same exact way. And he's saying it the same, in a way that I couldn't have said it like that. You know what I
God,
mean?
he's so eloquent.
Man, Asia is that eloquent. I can't wait till you have her on here, because
Oh, I can't
especially
wait.
having the the love for history as well. She's really going to be able to break some things down. And
Yeah, I love that. Man, you said something there that's really important. The ability to say, this person knows more than me. I'm going to let them speak. I don't
yeah,
know enough to have an opinion on this.
yeah,
Dude, if we could get that, if we could get every American in the fuck that, every citizen of
yeah,
Earth to feel
yeah,
comfortable saying, I
yeah,
don't know enough about this to have an opinion, so I'm going to
yeah.
shut up.
Yeah, and that goes, man. That goes for history. That goes for anything, man. And again, especially now, like women. Let's let women speak. You know what I mean? Let's let the elders speak. Let's let the children speak. The children may be able to tell us about the experience that they go through. Man, one of the first times we've ever performed and spoke at an anti-bullying assembly, because in Colorado Springs 4 years ago, the suicide rate in these middle school and high schools was just through the roof, and it's heartbreaking. And so the first time we went there, we spoke to the kids and we performed. And then our daughter, who was in elementary at the time, was like, "Oh, can I say something?" Absolutely. She's like, "While we were here, I wrote a poem."
Mm.
She said the poem, and the kids went crazy. Why? Because she was speaking from her experience. She was speaking from, okay, when I'm in class or when I go to school with my hair this way, or when I'm a new student and this and that, the same emotion I feel, I'm expressing that. And you know what? Yeah, so the school, the principal might have brought the reminders in to perform and to speak, but we also have a child here who can speak that same language that's gonna actually hit something with them. You know what I mean? And so it's like, yeah, man, you don't be afraid to give the microphone to somebody else.
Yeah, I just had an experience with a buddy of mine that I train with, and he's Montana born and bred white boy,
Yeah,
and we're having this kind of back and forth, and the version of the story that he was kind of getting was that he was supposed to be ashamed that he was white. And I just kind of began breaking down, like, man, I don't know. I've been around a lot of black people for many, many years, and I've
yeah,
never heard a black person say anything like that.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
I don't know where you heard that, but that would be inaccurate. And then the conversation kind of went from there. And what was interesting to me was he wasn't he he wasn't angry. He wasn't being belligerent with me. He was
yeah,
actually just like, yo, man, okay, speak to this then.
yeah,
Help me understand. And at the end of the conversation, he goes, man, I didn't actually see a black man until I was 17 years old. So I guess I probably don't have a very good concept of racism. And I was like, oh, thank you, dude.
yeah,
Thank
yeah,
you for saying that. No, you
yeah.
don't. You don't. Just like I have no sort of concept whatsoever to speak on what it's like to be a teenage girl, because I've never
Uh,
fucking been one. You know what I mean?
Straight up, straight up.
And I want to
Yeah,
see more of that.
that's real. And it's funny because, that's something that I didn't even really, I didn't think about, growing up. I went to, I was in the Congo. My first memories of life are from being in the Congo. Then I moved back with my mom. So I was in Belgium in a Belgian school. But the neighborhood I lived in wasn't, it was like, it was a projects, so it was immigrant families from all over Africa, from the Middle East. So it was a melting pot of people from all over the world. But I had my group of friends, a bunch of African families, and that's all I knew. That's all the girls I ever dated. It's not like something that was in my subconscious. It's not like, hey, I only date black. No, it's just like, these are the girls that are around me. You know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't until when I got older, I moved to Colorado, and I would make empowering music. You know what I mean? That would have like Black is beautiful themes. And then naturally, the more I'm into the underground hip hop world, the more I have white fans, a lot of white fans. And I remember one time this girl was like, "Oh man, first time I heard your music, I thought you were a racist." And I was like, how does that, come about? But I guess it's from the message of the empowerment and the black this and black that. But it's like, it doesn't mean that it's a racist thing. It's just what I'm used to seeing, and what I'm in the reality that I'm speaking of. I'm speaking of my reality and the things that I see and the things that I think that I feel can be better. You know what I mean? And that's what I was speaking on. And it's interesting that some people, just like your friend, it's like, oh man, I should be ashamed of being white. No, it's not like that. This is a misunderstanding. You know what I
Just be
mean? Like
aware. You
sometimes
should be aware that your experience ain't the only experience.
straight up, and that's life. You know what I mean? There's so much more to life. Just like, you know, even for me, it was the first time that I realized, oh man, like a lot of white kids support hip hop. You know what I mean? And then as we grow, even to this day, like a lot,
I want
of these
to
shows.
ask you about that, man. So
Yeah, yeah,
I, you know, man, skateboarding was really how I found hip hop.
yeah.
You know, skateboarding was how I found everything. It was how I found punk rock. It was how I found hip hop. And then those two worlds smashing together was how I
Go
found
hand in hand.
Fronty. Yeah.
Yeah,
And, you know, part of the shit for me was the reason that I felt called to read Revolutionary Suicide, Malcolm X, Soul on Ice, Radical Dharma, all these books was because of hip
yeah,
hop. And I know
yeah,
you've toured with and have relationships with some of my favorite MCs of all time. You know, Mos Def, or Yasin,
yeah.
and
Yeah,
Talib Kweli, and
yeah,
you know, that music blew me away. I just here's something that I feel like was missing in American culture, that the hip hop, the music that you make, that Yasin makes, that Talib, the
yeah,
Roots, there is this outside image of low income communities of ignorance,
yeah,
you know? And I always felt that we were looked at like we were fucking stupid, you know, like we were less than. And this idea of, you know, kind of this like almost Goodwill Hunting approach of like, man, fuck your school, I got a library card. You know,
right,
that was something I always really took from Talib, was like,
yeah,
it was cool to be smart. So I became on
yeah,
this, I became obsessed with this quest, because I wanted to chop it. I wanted to be able to chop it up with people like you and be like, oh yeah, no, I read that same shit. Oh no, I read that same shit.
yeah, yeah. And those guys in particular, because you know, um, those guys are dope MCs, and they're not afraid to say, you know what, man, this is what we do. Like we the reason we're able to be such dope MCs is because we're well read, and you know what I mean, because we're well learned, and we bought a bookstore because we knew that's what we needed to do in order to keep this alive. You know what I mean? In order to, otherwise, you know, so many businesses go bankrupt. So many businesses just, you know, I see it happening even around here. I'm like, yo, we have to support these black businesses before they go down. And then what? You know, we don't maintain the history. We don't maintain control of these things. But same thing, man. I think 1998, when the Black Star album came out, and the Roots, everything the Roots put out, you know, Common, all those guys, it changed my life because it's how I felt.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you want more. You want more than just, you know, some wild rap. You still want that edge. You still want that energy, but with more knowledge to it.
Yeah, it was
You know?
interesting, man. Common, you know, being from Chicago, Common is my favorite of all time.
Yeah.
Mainly because I felt like, you know, I just was so deep into his catalog that I kind of feel like I went through his journey with him, you know, from Can I Borrow a Dollar, where he was like fully just
Down,
on the hip hop shit, to
yeah.
like, you know, when he was hanging out with the Soulquarians, like when like Water for
Yeah.
Chocolate, when that came
That was
out,
great.
you could tell that was when he started really diving into the books, man.
Yeah.
His whole shit was changing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I
And
just, go ahead.
no, go ahead. I was gonna.
I
I
was,
just had because his pops, Lonnie Lynn, the one that's always doing the
yep.
poetry in the he lived in Denver. He had
Yeah.
a record store in Denver, so I used to see him all the time. And matter of fact, like, because he passed away a couple years ago, but right before that, Common had a show at Red Rocks with it was Common and Atmosphere, and I forgot something happened. We were side stage, and somebody threw something on the stage to hit Common, and Pops was like, as soon as he saw who the guy was, he jumped into the crowd. He was like, yo, you don't hurt my son. You know what I mean? And the security was like, no, we got him. He's like, you don't hurt my son. I'll take care of this, you know? And I just remember how G that was. I was like, man, this guy is like, he don't care that security. He's like, I'll take care. I'll protect my son. You know what I mean? Pops was a really good dude, man. He always showed love to everybody. And especially in the on the Denver scene, if he knew you were a hip hop artist, man, he showed love. He put your CD on consignment at his little record store, man. And it's just a beautiful person.
Yeah, man, I love that. You know, I don't have a relationship like that with my dad, and I really envied that through all their shit in their relationships, that they, you know, that they built what they had, you know, and that his dad got to be a part of his musical journey. You know, his book, One Day It'll All Make Sense.
Yeah.
I loved, and then this last summer, when his Let Love Win came out, I listened to that, man, and it was, for me, and as an adult, you know, him kind of siphoning through his childhood and kind of having this realization as a full-grown man of like, man, I still carry all this trauma and all this fucked up shit with me. You know, and the book ultimately led me to being like, okay, well, if Common goes to therapy, then I'm going to therapy. You know, you know, like
that's the theme now, man. That I'm so excited that people are finally opening up to the concept of therapy, to the concept of actually opening up to the trauma that you've had, that you've been holding on to. You know what I mean? I started a podcast a couple of years ago, and I kind of let it fall by the wayside because I got so, you know, I'm juggling so many things. It's called Father's Presence, and it's just conversing with different fathers about their journey, becoming young men, and also their journey as fathers, and just trying to navigate this whole thing. You know, so we'll have to do, you know, an episode.
Would love that.
Talk about that, but also Common's first book, the gentleman who helped him write it, the One Day It All Makes Sense, was Professor Adam Bradley, and he's a good friend of mine. He teaches at CU Boulder.
No shit.
Yeah. So, you know, like we got that connection, just, you know, talking about how they came about writing the book and stuff. It's dope, man. I feel like it's just we live in such a small world, and even smaller musical world. You know what I mean? That we're all interconnected, and we all have so many things in common. Like I said, that's why when we first connected, man, I already knew that it was bigger than just a panel. You know what I mean? It was bigger than two musicians about to perform at the same festival. It's like, nah, we got so much more in common. And as we grow in our friendship, you know, learning more and more every day, it's like, oh man, you read that book too? Oh man, you take your son to do that too? Like, I do the same thing. I did that with my son when he was that age too, you know, like, it's like,
dude, and that's it, man. That's like the magic. That's what that human connection, man. This thing that I keep saying, I was texting back and forth with Franti the other day, and he said, you know, the goal, because I kind of hit him up like, yo, man, I remember when you dropped Yell Fire. It's just crazy that he's a friend of mine, because man, he really was. I was like, here's my hip hop lane, here's my punk rock lane. I live in both of these worlds. And I remember that when the first time I heard his shit, I was just like, whoa, you brought them both together. And
you do it. Yeah.
And just so original and so different. And, you know, he said the other day to me, he said, you know, our goal should be to remind people that we are 99.8% alike, and that 0.2% difference is what makes life beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's my goal with the podcast and with music and with everything more, man. It used to be I wanted to be delivering the news and you know, speaking on all this shit that was wrong, and the more, you know, the older, and maybe it's just part of becoming a man and growing up, but the older I get, man, the more I just want to make people connect and realize how similar they are. And I see the anger in that dude with the Trump flag on his truck flipping everyone off, man. And my intention wasn't, when I saw him, immediately my heart hurt. I wasn't like, fuck you, man. I was like, dog, what is happening?
It's different. And I think it's a different energy. And that's exactly what with my podcast in particular, I seen that in men, young men like yourself. Like, I know your energy 10 years ago or 15 years ago wasn't the same energy as now. You know, especially punk rock and skater and all that. Like, we were all once like early 20s, just fired up. You know what I mean? Like, we reacted differently to different situations. And, you know, even somebody like Dead Prez, like Dead Prez was one of my favorite groups around, you know what I mean? But, and you look at Stick now, who was super fired up, and now he's like, yo, I'm jogging. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's a part of maturing. And again, like, and I have these stories. As a matter of fact, I remember I met Immortal Technique before he really blew up. So Revolutionary Volume 1 was out. I was in New York visiting a friend. It was my first time in New York. And she was like, yo, let's go to New York Cafe. And then Immortal Technique was there, so we connected. Boom, boom, boom. Before you know it, a few months later, he was coming to Boulder for the first time. He's like, yo, I never been out here, nigga. Let's wild out, whatever. So we go, he's performing. And afterwards, this is Immortal Technique at like his, you know, super fired up. And somebody asked, he was being interviewed afterwards, and somebody asked him, like, where do you see yourself in like 20 years from now? And he was like, I don't know, maybe I'll have some children, or maybe he said something about doing something for his grandchildren. And it's like something that happens in a man when they talk about their children and their children's children. You know what I mean? Like, it changes your mindset, man. Like, you go to a different place. You know what I mean? You're responsible now. You know, you're maturing. Like, you know what I mean? You're forced to mature and think a different way.
Yeah, I start thinking, you know, I used to have, you know, 10 years ago, I had this, I'm going to homeschool my kids, and they're going to know this, and this. And, you know, and then it's funny, man, then you hold that baby and you go, man, I would give my life for you to be happy and safe rather than militant and intelligent. Just be happy. You know,
have understanding. You know what I mean? Like, that's a big thing for me. It's like same thing that I want for my children, the same thing that I want for people in the world. It's like, I want people to have understanding when you walk out of that door, or when you watch something, like, have an understanding of what's going on. You know what I mean? Don't just take it at face value. You know, like, have an understanding of other people.
Yeah, I think that's going to be my new shit, because I've been trying to, you know, like I was saying, man, you know, with family and friends and shit that are new to the talk, not the talk, but new to the conversation. I'm just going to start giving them books and just being like, oh, cool, you're with it now. Okay, cool, then you're ready. Read this.
Yep, absolutely. And I think, you know, to me, the most important part is to keep that same energy. It's like, you know what, we here now. Let's not drop the ball. Let's not go back to what it was before. Now it's your duty and your responsibility to find out even more. Like, now that the door's open, just go in and just dive in. You know, after you've done one book, pick up another book.
Yeah, you can't look away now. You've acknowledged. I've seen the sign in your front yard. I know you've seen it.
That's it, man. It's really important, man. And it's funny, you know, even the concept of, you know, these things that we've been talking about in music. Our friends the other day was like, yo, our streams have been going up crazy. Why? Because now, you know what I
mean? Same, dude. Oh man, I feel guilty. But I made a post the other day. You know, I made this album called Culture.
Mm-hmm.
And you should, when we hop up, man, if you got time tonight, listen to Will Stand. It's the very first track of the album Culture. You know, I went into making, like, okay, cool, we're gonna make another record. You know, and at the time it was 2016. It was right after Trump got elected.
Yeah.
It was when I decided I was gonna make another record, and you know, man, I just started thinking that I needed to make something so when my kids went, you know, when the shit was popping off, you know, what was your cultural contribution to the conversation? I want to be like, well, this, you know, I put my heart, soul, money, everything I had into creating this for the world. And
Yep.
and it's funny, man. It's our least listened to record. You know, I spent almost $40K of my own money. I said no to 2 labels.
Hard out, man. All your finance, all your time and energy.
Yep. And I was like, okay, well, people are gonna hear, you know, I was like, well, because of the election, I'm gonna put these first 4 songs, the super, you know, potent shit. I'm gonna put those 4 songs together in the first chunk of the record, so people are like, okay, cool, he's about it. Yeah. And what kind of happened is they're like, oh, well, I'm just gonna go back and listen to the shit about love.
Yeah.
You know, they're like they didn't want it. And so I just reshared that shit last week and was like, look, if you didn't get it then,
try again.
Try again. Run that shit back now. Just like you resharing that freestyle.
It's like, yo, let me run this back one time. And it's like, oh, now I get it.
Yeah, now I see. Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about music, man, and I'll cut you loose.
Yeah. But real quick, it just goes to show you, man, that same thing you just shared, that's what Bob Marley did, man. That's what all these people did. Like, at the time, nobody was rocking with it like that. You know what I mean? But now it's like Bob Marley, one of the biggest musicians in the world. T-shirts and all that, you know, people that weren't even alive when he was around, and the music resonates. But did it resonate at the time? You know what I mean? Did he know that he was so beloved by the world like that? You know what I mean? That's the tough part, man. When things are gonna hit when in due time, or when it makes sense to whoever, you know.
Yeah, it's interesting, man. I think, you know, Bob, is a perfect example of that, because his claim to fame was Eric Clapton covering I Shot the Sheriff, and then his single Could You Be Loved and One Love. Those were his hits while he was alive. Yeah. And when I think of Bob, I think of Real Situation. I think of War. You know, you know.
Running and looting, like, man, it goes on like for days. The catalog is insane.
Yep. Yeah, he's the man. All right.
Yeah.
So we've established that we're both huge hip hop fans. So I have to ask you, top 5 dead or alive for you. I know it's hard.
Top 5 dead or alive. It's funny. My son just asked me that yesterday. I said 3, then I was like, go to bed. So, Black Thought, undeniably. If somebody doesn't have Black Thought on their top 5, they're insane.
Yep.
Rakim.
We're 2 for 5 right now. You and I have 2 for 5 right now.
Okay. Yasin Bey, aka Mos Def.
3 for 5.
Man, the last 2 tough, bro. They're tough because there's so many. I'm gonna go with Cube and Pac.
Respect.
I want to hear yours.
Okay, so we had your first 3 are on there. Rakim, Mos.
Yeah.
I would say, just personally for me, I don't put Pac on the list. He's number 6. Okay. But for me,
man, that's good. It's good enough.
Talib, just because he has such an impact on my life, man, and
yeah.
And Common.
I can see where that top 5 comes from, you know, and again, I think that's why a lot of time people expect to have the same top 5. It's impossible. Why? Because the first 3 we had the same ones. It's because those guys are undeniable, man. Those guys are machines. You know what I mean? But the last 2, it's the impact they had on your life. Pac's impact on my life. You know, I was rocking the Pac before I could speak English, because I could relate to the emotions that he you know what I mean, that he was giving in those songs. And Cube, I've been listening to Cube all week. From, you know, Wicked. If you go back and listen to Wicked, it's a wild song, and it just takes me back to that energy. You know what I mean?
That's interesting that Cube is on your top 5. I love that.
Yeah, man. Cube he's a different beast, man. Like, people forget. I think people forget.
Well, he did those like family movies, and I'm always like, do y'all remember West Side Connection? That motherfucker was raw, dude.
Yeah, man. Cube he's up there in my book.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. I did this this lecture series at a high school out here, and this kid said, you know, what was the most meaningful song to you growing up? And I, without hesitation, said "Me Against the World." And especially that the second verse, that kid from the Outlaws, you know, won't somebody help me because I'm all by myself. See, you know, like it's crazy because I still listen to that, and it just brings me back to adolescence of like, that's how I felt, you know. That was really, and I've been, just last year, you know, it was when I was reading that common book, I was like cleansing my diet, my musical diet of like, man, maybe getting smoked out and listening to Me Against the World isn't a good idea anymore. You know, and listening to, you know, Illmatic, you know, there's some songs on there that, you know, that Nas is number 7, but but I mean, just some of that shit, man, I just have, you know, my trauma brain takes over, and I can really start thinking like, nah, it's me, dude. It isn't this family. It's none of this shit. Everybody, you know, that's my default setting, is that I'm by myself, you know, and I know that not to be true.
Sure.
So what was the first record you heard that made you know you wanted to be an MC?
Eric B. and Rakim, Paid in Full. I could still say, you know, I could rap that whole joint right now. And to me, that's what's incredible, is thinking how old he was when he wrote that. You know what I mean? It's like, yo, come on, man. Like, Rakim was a genius. Which, you know, I think that era is just different, because even when you look at what Nas wrote when he was 15, like, you know, Live at the Barbecue, when you listen to his verse, like Streets Disciple, it's incredible with these guys. I think New York just breeds like incredible MCs.
Joey Badass, man, that's another dude that made a record that was like, you know, that dude risked his whole, he was on the like, I'm about to be the next Jay-Z pop star rise, and then he dropped All American Badass. Risked his life to make that record.
Our daughter, our second daughter, who's 12, she wanted to, you know, learn how to DJ. So I put her in Denver DJ school. And so now every Sunday she does like a little live stream. And today I put it on Facebook, and I was like, yo, check out this Joey Badass album. And she picked a couple songs from there and played them today. And I was like, yo, man, this album is so incredible.
The production, the thing I love about that record is it goes in waves. It takes you up to this like full 100% aggression, and then brings you back down, and like, we're gonna be all right.
Risks. He even took risks on the album, singing more, you know what I mean, going out of his comfort zone. And, you know, sometimes that's what it takes. But yeah, man.
Yeah, I met him real briefly. It was funny, man. We were in Brooklyn getting ready to start a tour, and my drummer plays this reggae residency at this like fancy spot in Williamsburg at the top of this hotel.
Nice.
But I left the spot to go get a falafel, and I'm like standing in line to get food, and I look across the street, and homies posted up, and someone's you know, like a pro photographer taking pictures, and I was like, is that fucking Joey Badass?
Yeah.
And I went over just with that, just, yo, man, your shit's changing the world, man. And he dabbed me up and was real cool and chopped it up for a second. And I thought that was real cool. He like paused the photographer so we could shoot the shit for a second, and then, you know.
Yeah, we met him. We performed at Soundset. We performed at Soundset 2013, and that was Joey Badass's first festival. And I remember, like, I was like, yo, you that, you know, because he had just had that MTV show, whatever, you know, Survival of the Fittest, and all that. And so I was like, yo, yeah, I'm familiar with what you do. He's like, yeah, that's what's up. He's like, man, yo, I'm kind of hella nervous about to get on the stage. I mean, you talking about Soundset, it was like 10,000 people, you know what I mean? And then fast forward, the following year, he was opening for Wiz Khalifa on tour, and they came through Denver, so we went to check him out. He was like, yo, what y'all doing out here? We're like, yo, we live here. And then and he was like, yo, that's what's up. And just watching the growth from, yo, this is my first festival, to now I'm on tour with Wiz Khalifa and just killing it. You know what I mean? And it's incredible.
He's a presence.
Yeah,
that 1999 album, man, was like, I just love that jazz rap shit, man.
Yeah, and then you know, even fast forward, just last year, we went to see him and Flatbush Zombies, that whole Beast Coast thing they just did. sold out Red Rocks.
They sold
Bro,
that shit out? Man.
it was insane. Like, and because we were, we were about to put out a record, so we were going to talk to this agent, and you know what I mean. It was one of those type of nights, and but just watching them celebrate, you know what I mean, like catching up with them, and they were like, "Yo, this is incredible," and forgetting that it's not every day you're at Red Rocks, you know what I mean. So like after Red Rocks, they're going back to New York, you know what I mean, like, and I remember thinking about that, like watching on their social media, like a week later, they were like, nigga, we killed Red Rocks last week. You know, they were still talking about it because it's that big of a deal. You know what I mean?
Yeah, man, that was one Band-Aid that really hurt this summer. Was, my whole life has been, Red Rocks means you made it, and we were supposed to play with Francie this summer yesterday.
Yeah.
And so what's crazy, man, me and my manager, who's my best friend, we sat down at the end of last year and said, okay, what's our 2020 goal?
Yeah.
And it was Red Rocks, Europe tour, and sell out the Bluebird. And by the end of February, we had done all of them, and we were like, 2020, motherfucker, we're in here.
Yeah.
And there was this kind of magic release of, like we were messaging back and forth yesterday of just, it's like, man, if I dwell on it too much, it'll make me crazy, because not just the Red Rocks, not just the exposure and all of the growth that would have happened, but it's just like, we was just on fire, man. And it's like so much money, so much growth. It's just like, we just had a year taken from us. It's like, we would have done all that shit this summer, and then next summer would have been that much more,
It gets like that, man. It's the worst. And we did Red Rocks 2 summers ago with Black Star and Nas and Brother Ali and Royce the 5'9". Killer line.
Yeah, I remember seeing y'all on that, dude. Brother Ali is another one that's undeniable, one of the greatest, man.
Yep. We went on tour with him in 2012.
No shit?
That was our first national tour.
Damn. Yeah, you guys have done shit with Lauryn Hill, with Black Star. You've done.
Yeah, that one was next level.
Yeah. Well, man, I really appreciate your time, homie. And yeah, whenever you want to do an episode on your podcast, get at me, man. We'll do it. I'm home. So
yeah, for sure. And then one thing I would say, since we were talking about music, on the same topic, because when people say, yo, what should I do to gain understanding, especially of the times that we in, how everybody's like revisiting certain albums and certain songs. It's like, to gain understanding, it's like, listen to some of these artists, like listen to Pac, but beyond California Love. You know what I mean? Listen to Pac beyond Hit 'Em Up. You know what I mean? Like you said, Me Against the World. A lot of people never even heard that song. It's like, man, go back and dig into that. Go back and dig into Bob Marley's catalog and really listen to what he's been saying, because this is nothing new. Like even some of our friends like Rebel Diaz, they have a few songs, they have a few albums. Listen to Satsang. Go back and listen to that album you were talking about. Like that's what I'm doing tonight. That's what I'm listening to. It's like, there are songs out there. Listen to Dead President's first album. Let it free. You know what I mean? Like, and see how it makes you feel right now. And this is their album from 2000. You know what I mean? So I think that's something that's very important for people to do, is to go back and revisit some of these songs, go back and revisit some of these movies that came out, like The Spook That Sat by the Door, go back and revisit some of these books and
do the right thing.
Do the right thing, bro. Spike Lee's a visionary.
Tried to tell him.
Spike Lee's a visionary, man.
Oh, man. Yeah, dude. Big love to you.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Let's stay in touch, man. I appreciate you having me on this, and we'll stay connected.
Yeah, bro. Take care.
Much love. Peace.